Welcome to 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a book, we talk about it, we read it slowly because we're slow readers, we enjoy it, we make jokes because we're joke tellers, we have a good time. I am Chad Post from Open Letter Books, which Open Letter Books, winner of last night's National Book Award for Translation, with Akcho by Elisa Shua Dusapin and Anissa Abbas Higgins, won. We won finally. So that's to me.
Congratulations, man. That's fantastic.
Cheers. Unbelievable. I didn't think we were really going to win at all, but what a surprise and what a fantastic. It's funny because first I should introduce Brian Wood, constant co-host, author, Joytime Killbox.
That's fine. Enough about me. Go back to your guys' book winning an award. I want to hear more about this.
What was funny is that last year when we bought the rights to it, so we bought the rights to it in the summer of 2020. It came out in England. Winter and Stock Show came out in England on like March 11th, like the pandemic day in England, and got like completely overlooked. And when we bought the rights in the early May, early June, whenever it was of the summer, there's an intern who worked for us named Abby who had read it first. I'd asked for it to see it. She read it. She's like, you should read this. I read it over a weekend. And I called and told people, this is the book that will win the National Book Award for translation. And if we can get the rights to this, we will win the award. And they're like, okay, whatever, Chad. Like, you say a lot of crazy shit. Like, you're not stable in any way, shape, or form. Like, the words that you come out of your mouth are 100% inaccurate. So no, you're not going to win no fucking national book. But we won. We actually won.
That's so cool.
So cool. So how are you doing, man?
Pretty good.
Oh, let me add one thing before I leave this, is that if you want to get the Open Letter book, the Winter and Stock Show, with the golden medallion on it that says National Book Award winner, pre-order from our website using the code NBA Gold, all one word, NBA Gold. And as soon as those arrive from the printer, they're at the printer now. We just have to change the medallion to gold and to winner instead of just finalist. And as soon as those arrive, we will ship them to you and you can get 50% off. So the highest discount we've ever given, 50% straight, NBA Gold at openletterbooks.org.
Okay, but if I'm a book collector, which one's going to be worth more money later?
Do you know what's going to be worth the most money? This is crazy, but I'm serious about this. Is the version that we just printed yesterday at Lightning Source, the print-on-demand thing for Ingram. There's only 300 copies of that one that's available, and you'll know that it's it because it has a barcode on the back page that's from Lightning Source. But it was the only way that we could get copies. And like, there's a printing problem, there's a paper shortage, it's supply chain issues. Like, we initially weren't going to get copies of this book until March.
Wow, great timing. Perfect timing. I was like, strike while the iron's hot. Yeah.
March. Anyways, how are you doing, man?
Not bad. I don't know. It's tough. I like traveled for the first time in the pandemic, and I went to Florida to this concert, and it's really cool because the singer pulled me up on stage. I thought it was going to be really amazing, but I don't know. It ended up being a very terrible experience for me. I'm really pissed off about it.
Did you get pissed on?
I sent you that. I sent you that story because it's so perfectly bizarre that you can't make it up. And like I'd expect it to be something in a book because it's a brass band that's playing Rage Against the Machine cover, really terrible, and then like someone gets peed on stage, and now it's in Florida, so it's just everything about it is 100% perfect, and like it should be in a Bolaño book or something. But
so I have two comments on that. One is that when they're talking about species and
sorry,
Katie,
Hi.
welcome, Katie.
We were talking about public urination.
Yeah, we're talking about public urination. The funniest story that I've ever heard was when the Dave Matthews Band was in Chicago and their tour truck stopped on the bridge for the Chicago River and dumped the entirety of their like their outhouse, whatever, not outhouse, their toilet
Black water.
And it hit a boat filled with tourists who are on like the architectural tour in Chicago, just got swarmed on with like Dave Matthews and shit.
That's what it's like to listen to one of their albums, actually.
It's like a 3D version.
It's the immersive. It's the immersive experience.
The immersive.
Yeah, I was just telling you about how I got called up on stage at a show in Florida. It was terrible.
Dave Matthews in particular?
No, it's a band called Brass Against. I think I forget.
It's Brass Against. I think you're right.
I'm traumatized. I don't remember the band name.
The lead singer, was doing a cover of Rage Against the Machine and pissed on a audience member during the middle of it and got arrested.
Oh my God.
Florida. How are you doing, Katie?
Good. Congratulations.
Thank you. Did you already
talk about how wonderful Open Letter is and the book and so exciting and hurrah?
We just said the hurrah part. And also I'll remind everyone, NBA Gold. If you use that code word on openletterbooks.org, you get 50% off of the version with the gold medallion, the winning National Book Award winner medallion on the cover. Book that only exists in that form. So
hooray!
Anyways, yeah, it's wild. Those people, Elisa and Anissa, are wonderful, and I'm so glad for them.
It's so awesome.
I should say, because I used to truly believe that everyone who won or was on this knew ahead of time. We did not know until it actually took place. In fact, because of the pandemic, they didn't do it live for the translation finalists. The translation finalists recorded their section at like 5 or 4 o'clock Eastern time, so that it was like not crazy for their own time zones, because there was someone that was in China, it was like all over the world, obviously. And when they recorded it, we had like a prep session beforehand, and the National Book Foundation people were like, okay, Anissa, Lisa, you're going to come on at 4 o'clock to this link. We're going to go through the ceremony as if it's like the real ceremony. We're just recording it so we can play it later at 7. And no matter what happens, do not tell Chad. Don't tell Chad. Chad's not good at keeping secrets.
So they knew before you?
Yeah. By a couple hours.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful for them. I'm so happy.
They look shocked on screen. If you watch it, they look like they had no clue. So amazing. Anyways, how are you doing, Katie? How is your 2666 reading for the week?
Everything's good. I went out and I'm just rushing in after a nice, long, leisurely Spanish lunch with half a bottle of red wine, celebrating the NBA win.
Well, I just took a shot.
I'm here. We're all good. We're celebrating for you guys. 6 hours ahead. So, yes, I'm here.
Good. What do you guys think of this section now that we're in the crimes?
It feels like it should be an HBO show because it's got everything HBO loves. Women getting murdered.
Yeah.
That's it.
Early. Yeah.
In Succession, men get murdered. So it's a play against, yeah. And women.
So I just have to mark. I've been reading ahead, I have to admit. I can't stop.
Oh my goodness.
So where do we stop? I don't want to say.
We're 37. We stopped at the end. So this section begins with a series of chronicling the deaths of, or the bodies that are found in Santa Teresa, which I have a question about in a second. But it chronicles the bodies that are found in Santa Teresa, sort of chronicles the investigation into them, although the investigation is pretty haphazard and not really fulfilling. There is an inspector, Jesus de Dios, I forget what his name is.
Juan de Dios Martinez.
Juan de Dios Martinez, who gets involved with the director of the mental institution, where he goes to talk to her about like potential, not even related to the crimes of the women. What he's actually investigating is someone who goes into churches and shits all over them and pisses all over them and ends up stabbing like a priest and a sexton. And so he's investigating that. And there's more attention in this section to the investigation of the penitent, as they refer to him,
Yeah.
than there is of the women that are murdered. And then we get a few other things, like a North American, a woman from Arizona and her friend come down into Santa Teresa to experience the nightlife. Her friend goes missing and is found dead. She hires a private investigator named Harry
No.
Yeah. She doesn't hire him, but he's working for her.
I'm fucking up.
Wait, what? Where'd you go?
It's funny in your
Guys, sorry. Hold on.
in your
Not
rundown.
a private investigator.
He's like a sheriff, isn't he?
He's a sheriff. That's a big difference. He is a U.S. official.
The U.S.
in Huntsville,
official
Arizona.
sheriff that goes down from Arizona to Santa Teresa to investigate the disappearance and murder of this woman, Lucia. And Lucianne, that's what it is. I'm not looking at the book. I'm going off of memory, and you know how many names I remember? I remember your name. Your name is written here. Otherwise, I have no clue.
Hold on. I'm just here to
Catherine?
point out your mistakes.
So whoever, the sheriff
Just
goes
another
down
woman.
to investigate. We have a bit of that, but his story wraps up next week, so we might table that a little bit. But then this section, when you're asking about where it ends and the pages we end at, this section ends with a seer who goes on TV and
Florita.
Florita,
Yeah. Whatever her name is.
Whatever her name is. Are you both old enough to remember the Caribbean woman that did the ads?
Your man's cheating on you. Everybody, like, why would you call her? It's always cheating. Miss Cleo, right?
Miss Cleo.
That's it. Yes.
Miss Cleo.
Couldn't remember her name either.
Well, this is interesting because of the conversation that we had last week about sight and about eyes and about blindness and sight. And and this Florita Almada section is interesting because like the mother is blind, she cares for the mother, like then she develops this gift of sight.
Her husband goes blind.
Then the husband goes blind. Yeah. And isn't it like, I'm trying to remember, I thought that, and I could be wrong, but I thought that it was like she was not only seeing, like when she was at the, hold on, I might just be like in the next section, which concerns me. So I won't say any more about that.
She crawls across the floor, and she does mention the ending section of this is like an 8-page set piece in which it describes her history and then her being on TV.
Yeah.
And that the TV program is like a little bit fucked up because the weather is bad in Santa Teresa, so people can't see it. And when she's on there, she feels the sight, feels the presence coming through, and doesn't want to let it because she's afraid that she's on the floor and like crawl around and like things get really like physically intense. And then she does do that. She closes her eyes. It takes over. She has that experience. So that's as far as we are with any of this. In terms of like the general summary to like catch up where people were to read to and where we stopped.
Okay.
For this week is with her bit. But otherwise, like it's interesting because it is like there are two threads that are going on. One is the like it's not Nouveau Roman-esque, but it's sort of close in terms of like the murders, where keeps describing the murders in this very like, newspaper way, like very sterile, very like concrete way. And there are certain details that come up from that repeat over and over again. Vaginally and anally raped, strangled. These happen over and over again.
Long straight brown hair. Although, I think it's like you can tease out similarities between certain of the murders into like different camps. So there does seem to be this thread of like younger girls, young teens, the long straight hair, 5'3", so like that height, 5'3" is mentioned several times, and the black Peregrino. So again, like the car,
which is sort of
which we see that Peregrino appear first in the part about fate.
Yep.
Where like when everything's going down with Rosa Amalfitano and Fate, and they're like trying to escape. Like Amalfitano is out on the street, like talking to a guy in a black Peregrino who's been watching the house. Yep. So there's this element of like, you know, like we've had these breadcrumbs drop that these could be serial killings, but it is something bigger than that. But maybe we're seeing this through line of these particular cases, because we also know from some of these cases that they're like your standard fare domestic violence. And that, so sometimes we do know who has killed the women, but it's the proliferation of them and of the different types that seem so
I believe in this this book, the Chris Andrews book on Bolaño's fiction, an expanding universe, I think it mentions somewhere in here how many there are. I believe there's 109 women's deaths that are chronicled in this section. Okay. Which, and I think that a certain percentage of them are solved, quote unquote, where it is what you say, where it's like the boyfriend, the husband, the domestic violence, the like, God, it's so fucking horrifying. The whole thing is so horrifying. This is like, we're in the horrifyingness. But one thing that you referenced that we've talked about several times on here that is part of this book is the idea of overinterpretation. So Andrews goes through like 4 elements of Bolaño's fiction that sort of are how he manufactures this like ongoing system. One is like reusing characters. So characters reappear, like Lalo Cura is in a story and then is also in this book, and they have different backgrounds, same name, but like fill a similar role. And then one of the other things he says is that the characters tend to overinterpret. And I'll just read this paragraph. The term overinterpretation will be used non-pejoratively here to refer to the way certain characters and narrators seize on minimal details, invest them with weighty significance, and invent stories to connect and explain them. I call this overinterpretation because it ignores the criteria of economy and of coherence that, according to Umberto Eco, guides standard forensic and scientific inquiries. These criteria bring the process of interpretation to a close when a putative clue has received a relatively simple explanation that fits the rest of the evidence. Bolaño's overinterpreters make something out of nothing or join cheapy dots, to borrow a metaphor from Richard Rorty. Some are paranoid, some suffer from delusions, others manifest a benign creative form of apophenia, which the psychologist Klaus Conrad defined as an unmotivated seeing of connections accompanied by a specific feeling of abnormal meaningfulness. And this is something we talked about before, of like as the reader as like a stand-in for certain of the characters, where we are like over-interpreting. So when you say like the 5'2", the long hair, the strangulation, the vaginal and anally rape, these things keep hinting up as if we could overinvest in them as there is a serial killer instead of a machinery of killing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I both loved and hated this one paragraph at the beginning of this section, 353. So you get the first, real like creepy first death with the women praying by it when the guy shows up, kind of aloof about it. It says, this happened in 1993, January 1993. From then on, the killings of women began to be counted. And it goes on, it does more, but this idea of like it didn't count until then.
Yeah.
And then there was a bunch that happened before that, but we'll just start here, I guess. Like it.
Yeah,
there's
so
like
unsettling.
And then
sense of arbitrariness.
Yeah.
And then there's like, these little ticks where it'll be like, well, then there were no deaths in November, which I don't believe that.
No, not at all.
So like, I'm like, it's like, and there's the one part like toward the
July, there's like one line, July and August, there were no deaths.
There were no deaths. And then it's like, and there's one part here with La Locura when, and it's like something, and it was in December. And in December, there were no more deaths and the year ended peacefully.
Yeah.
And you're just like, that's not true, or you suspect that's not true.
Yeah, I think it's great the way it's juxtaposed with, again, how shoddy this investigation seems to be.
Yeah.
Well, there's no investigation.
Unless you kill somebody that matters or that we care about, they're basically saying, unless they matter or we care about it, I'll do my job, but I'm not going to do my job.
Related to, so Lalo Cura is a bodyguard for whom?
For Pedro oops, I keep doing this. Hold on, sorry, I keep turning off my. Yeah, Pedro. Is it Rengifo or Rengrife?
Yeah, I think that's right. But not for him, but for his wife.
Right, for the wife. But
And
we know that Pedro,
he's
the other Pedro Negrete, who is like the
Police
head of the police department, is pals with this criminal, this we don't, probably a narco, big drug lord, and that he supplies him with, like, they say, an hombre de confianza, like your people you can trust,
Yeah.
And so he's a kid. He's a young guy. We know he's like he's a young teen. Maybe he's 15 or 16, because by the time he's like in the future training to be like a cop, he's like 17 years old. So we have this scene where the people that he's working with, and they're guarding this crime lord's wife, and she goes to like visit a friend or whatever. And you have this really interesting like slow motion scene, right, where like he sees some people coming down the street and they're walking behind. This was in our section, right?
Yep.
Okay. I just really am concerned. So he sees them like walking on the street. It's like slow motion. He notices them. They're behind these two maids that are like chatting. And then he sees that the other two guys that he's working with are taking off, and they're like running down the street. Mm-hmm. And so La Locura, who we have to remember is like, a teen kid,
not like 17 at that point.
He's not even 17 at that point. Like saves the day, but he also ends up killing one of the gunmen, who happens to be like a cop.
Doesn't he kill both of them?
Because he kills both.
He shoots them both, but then he goes up and fucking fires right into the head of the cop, and then shoots at his partners.
And then he turns around and he shoots at the guys that deserted their like post. And then it has to be this big deal where they're like, oh, like, it's like what you see here is that there's this game, there are these rules of the game, there's this like rules of engagement and operation in Santa Teresa between like the criminals, between the cops, between different departments of the police as well, that La Locura is being like initiated into this world, but no one has actually told him what the rules of the game are. And so like I think he's this incredible stand-in, because he's in this way, like he's to me, he reads as like an innocent. So he's not innocent, obviously, in like a traditional sense, but he's like he's like a good guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know he's a good guy in this like bad system. He's going to do bad things, but he has like a pure heart, which is like sort of this Bolaño type character, right? Of like the good outsider, like the good person on the periphery who's like, I don't know, La Locura is really interesting. I read something, I'm not gonna be able to cite it, and I wonder if we're gonna see this later, but I was reading something on somebody's blog where they talk about how La Locura is the son of Arturo Balano in something. I don't even know if it's in 2666. It could be in one of Bolaño's other writings, or it could be a note, but that like he's fathered by Arturo Balano.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, he does have the other story that I forget what it's called, but it's referenced in here. It's like his name's in the title of it, from Last Evenings on Earth.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some from there as well.
Some sort of like, yeah. And of course we know that like La Locura, is La Locura, madness, which is a fun play on words in Spanish.
Which I thought was fun until I realized that Bolaño actually explained it in the text, and that made it less fun for me.
So that's not a gloss in the translation.
Oh, I don't know. Do you know?
I wish I had the original. I think that's a gloss.
You think Natasha added that?
Yeah.
To explain the madness.
Yeah, I don't
understand what Spanish words people don't know.
Well, locura, would you necessarily know? Because you'd have to put together la locura. I mean, loco or loca, but to put la locura is like the madness. Madness is a noun, and so I mean, it's been a zillion years since I read it. I think that was a translation gloss. Just explaining the significance of that, explaining the play on words of that. I don't think the Bolaño.
That makes it less. That makes it better for me. I thought if I don't know why because it was included in the original, but including the original, I'm like, oh, we don't.
No, I don't think it is because I have to say,
we have a situation with a book just like this, with that sort of situation where you could explain in a gloss a name and it's not explained in that gloss. So I guess I keep.
Yeah. No, I think in this case, if I remember correctly, I think when I read it, I think I remember like figuring that out at some point and being like excited by that discovery, which I do believe that it's a gloss, a translation gloss.
I believe that translator Will Vanderheyden's cat is named after Lalo Kira.
Really? Lalo?
Yep. I think it's Lalo. Is named after. Cool. He's probably listening to this, not right now, but he will eventually, and he'll hear that, and he'll text me and tell me that I was right or wrong. But I believe that it's named after.
We'll just have to wait.
We'll just have to wait.
We'll just have to wait for Will's confirmation.
On here at some point too.
That'll be good. Let's talk about. Can we talk about the sacrophobia? Can we talk a little bit about the penitent?
Yeah.
And
so it is like the real mystery, quote unquote, that's being investigated here.
Right.
Go for it.
Go forth. Discuss the penitent.
Yeah, I'm waiting for you to pick that up. And
no, I want to talk about it, but I want you guys to talk about it.
You want us to talk about it?
Brian, tell us about the penitent. What do you think?
Well, I may have said this before on a different season, but on one of my visits to Paris, I went to go see Napoleon's sarcophagus. This beautiful mahogany sarcophagus. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's absolutely incredible. Very fitting for the terrible general.
The tiny general.
Yeah, exactly. So it's this beautiful, wonderful mahogany sarcophagus, and it's in this giant, like 3-story, like rotunda type thing. And so it's like there's security guards all around it, and everybody's shh, be quiet, And next to me, this older man, I start hearing like this sound. I can't figure out, I can't place it, I can't see what it is. And I look over, and this guy is just dumping his entire bladder on the marble floor. Like you hear it splashing, splash. And it goes over the marble floor and then down like 3 stories onto where Napoleon's sarcophagus is, to the side of it. It doesn't hit it, but so it's just water falling down. And the French security guard looks at me and looks at the man. It's like, what? No. He like doesn't know what to do. And this guy is just incontinent. It's just incontinence. Like it's not doing it on purpose. But it was, to me, like it was like this wonderful scene. This sacred place, and it just he's just literally pissing on his
rivers.
Yeah, all over it. And so that part made me think of that, and I just chuckled. I mean, there was no murders or anything like that, but the idea of desecrating something that we hold dear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, like when the idea of the sacred, like we've seen that wording come up before throughout the book, but particularly in this last section with Fate, when not Chucho Flores, Charlie Cruz is talking about like the death of the sacred in film. He's speaking specifically about art, right? But the idea of like, I think the idea of the sacred here is important, and of like sacred space and that desecration. Like, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it's an interesting choice, like to give us another crime that's occupying the attention. It could have been any crime. So the fact that like this is the crime, this is the criminal that Bolaño chooses to use as like this counterweight to the proliferation of the women's murders, I think is probably significant. And I'm wondering what you make of the fact that like Elvira Campos, the director of like the insane asylum, right? She says, again, another insane asylum. She says, well, what you have on your hands here is like a sacrophobic. It's someone that is, and then that's that really wonderful section about all the different phobias.
Yeah, that's super.
It's so funny. Great. That's so good. But the idea of like,
would you rather have? You're a fear?
It's just like, and the most surprising. But the idea of like the sacrophobic and the idea of the, I mean, he says he wants to bring up Dracula in that moment and is like embarrassed to be like, oh, it's like Dracula with the crucifixes. But I think that's a really interesting insertion. Like,
Dracula,
to bring that up, that's an interesting reference. Like, now we're going to bring in, we've been talking about Revelation, we've been talking about these different things, and now let's bring in Dracula.
You know what? Okay, so I have a thing related to that. So when we do the remembered part by Frazan, the third part of his part trilogy, this will come up a lot. But Dracula is a book all about real estate. Dracula is all about ownership and property, and this book sort of has that too, like the in the way that like the land and the landscape of the maquiladoras and where they work, and the fact that you keep mentioning that they are workers, they frequently are referred to as like this is the place that they worked. And they're always generic, like multinational names, like West
Right.
Injust, like it's just
it's like East West.
Like what do you do? And they're like, we make sandwiches to be distributed throughout like the other places that people work. Like this is ridiculous. But like that it is a property based thing. And the thing with the God, with the shitting and pissing all over the churches, what it reminded me of is that up until this point we keep having this idea of like the God being there's the pit, but also like the revelation. Like God is the truth, is the full version of like what reality is, of what the world can be, what everything is as like a one. And this is just shitting on that. And that like the world as it is like literally way more fucked up and way less like religious in that way. Like the real life is corrupt and sort of gross physically, but also like can be desecrated.
Well,
sorry, Brian, I keep muting you, Brian, because I can hear the background. So whenever you need to just unmute yourself.
Got it.
No, now you're muted, and now you're talking. Okay.
I'm curious if he wants us in this book to consider the way they treat these spaces being defiled versus the human body being destroyed.
Yeah.
So that I like the way that those are next to each other, and it also makes me think of just like these sacred spaces are due to the terrors of colonialization of Mexico, right? So I'm just curious if he's kind of playing with these ideas and setting them next to each other in this idea of apocalypse.
I like the idea. Yeah, that I think is very true, and like very does tie into like the idea of the construction of truth, or the construction of like what they came in and changed the religion.
Right. Well, and they changed religion building over something else.
Building over something else, yeah.
Yeah.
And building monuments.
Yeah, and it's interesting too to like contrast like the idea of like the sacred space and of the church with the fact that these are in neighborhoods that are like these proliferating colonias, these neighborhoods that are like these, sometimes they're working class places, other times they're like in abject poverty. So we have the description of Florita. I think it's with Florita, or maybe, well, we know that Lalo is from, and Florita too. Like they're describing these places where people have done a really good job putting together their like shack with like zinc and like scraps. Yep. So there's this idea of like, the church and the sacred space that's on the periphery of these other spaces that are even more, that are completely marginal and proliferating, like the idea of the growth, right? And of the neoliberal growth. Like we can't separate this from globalization. We can't separate this from like the economic forces that are driving it. And religion, especially the Catholic Church in this case, is completely antithetical to that type of modernization and that type of movement, right? And of fast movement and acceleration. And it's interesting because like the way that Bologna, we haven't read through this whole section, but the way that it's presented in the beginning by interweaving like the timelines of these crimes and the investigations, and Juan de Dios Martinez and like some of the other cops and the investigators that appear, is that like, you know, you have the sense, or at least I have the sense, that at any moment we're going to like see the relationship between the penitent and the murders. So again,
Right.
it's like that, it's that setting us up with
Overinterpretation.
this style of writing and of this, like, you know, this like the traditional like crime novel where what, you know, unless, because we get frustrated with red herrings. Like if you read crime fiction, right, it's very, it can, you know, the criticism of somebody might be, you know, that something's a total red herring and that it's like they're just playing with you. Like it's not, that's not a good thing necessarily in crime fiction, right? And in this case, it's just, it's all of that, like it's setting up these expectations for us as readers for where the connections are supposed to be. And we don't know if we're going to get them. We probably won't. Like at this point, we're sort of conditioned to realize that there might not, the connection is not necessarily between the crimes. The connection is found, like the locus there is like, are the cops. It's the system. It's not the crimes. Like what does everything have in common?
Well, that's interesting that you say it that way, because I think like it's related to the cops, because it's also like the people that murder, I think, are all another one of those systems. Like those people are all like, there's some that are solved of like the boyfriend or the husband or whatever, but like all these men are murdering these women like without
Right.
recourse for the
That's
most
what I mean. I think like the expectation of the reader is that we can just pin this on one person and one thing.
Yeah.
And that's not, we're not getting that at all. Like
No.
this is a wide sweeping problem, but we want it to be this detective story where it's like, oh, it's the German kid, right? He's like a Nazi and he's murdering all the people. Oh, I can make that connection. He's like, oh, no. Like the female body is being destroyed over and over and over and over again throughout history, and it's happening right now, and it's an apocalypse. Like sit and swim, enjoy.
And this is the longest section of the book.
So we also have in this section the introduction of this character of Sergio Gonzalez, who is a character that is based on a real journalist who wrote Bones in the Desert and also The Femicide Machine. So a real Mexican journalist who like, you know, dove into problematizing and analyzing and writing about the crimes in Juarez. And he and Bolaño had, you know, extensive correspondence. And Bolaño sort of lifted language and the structure of Gonzalez reporting on the crimes in Bones in the Desert is sort of like how Bolaño then describes, like, you know, a body was found, a woman like this stature, this physical type. I mean, the number of times that we see that somebody was vaginally and anally raped, it's just like the constant, right, of that. So we see him now as an introduction as a character. And I think he has more to play later on, but at least at the beginning. And again, he's there to write about something else too, like Fate was.
Yeah.
Again, he's there to write about something else. He's there to write about the penitent, right?
Yes. Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's sent there to
write about
so
the
he can
penitent.
talk to all the different churches. And yeah, exactly.
Right. So Gonzalez is in there, and I'm interested. I think eventually, and maybe when we've spent more time with the section on the crimes, just to talk a little bit about how the crimes are written. And I think we should think a little bit about the idea of testimony versus, and I don't know what to call it, but another type of writing. So we can, like, if we think about Sergio Gonzalez and we think about like a journalistic style of like accounting for these deaths and of like raising awareness, providing information, providing facts, drawing conclusions, right? But really kind of focusing on a more like straightforward testimonial witnessing of the crimes versus what Bolaño does, which, like, we're not talking about witnessing at all with Bolaño. It's like, it is not cut and dry. It is about dreams and nightmares and abysses and madness. It's another kind of approach. And the fact that, like, the section with the crimes, it alternates between this sort of like testimonial style, right, which he's lifting from Bones in the Desert.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have so much of the uncanny. We still have so much of the I don't know, like the weakness of language, or the inability of language to express what's going on. We have the seer, we have the sight, we have madness. And so again, like, it's this pushing against like a straightforward like testimony, and it's offering us something else.
I think that somewhere in this How We Became Postmodern, Everything All the Time Everywhere by Stuart Joffrey's Verso book that I started reading has something that relates to that specifically, but I can't find it. The closest I can find is this, and it's from the critic Dick Hebdige. I don't know if that's pronounced right. Okay, so it's talking about defining postmodernism as a whole. One strand of postmodernism thought that Hebdige identified is that it problematizes signification, inhabiting the semantic black hole into which meaning has imploded. How postmodern thought might express its critique of signification from inside that black hole is an interesting question for students, though one they would have trouble communicating the world outside. But there is this idea of like, that comes up somewhere in this introduction about like testimony and representation. And a postmodern representation is where the signifiers have broken. And that just representing what's in front of you isn't quite enough, I guess, is like, and this book is all based on the idea that neoliberalism relied upon postmodern liberation to free itself from like the neoliberal economics is like freeing itself from regulation, freeing itself from meaning, freeing itself from like all these things that are like moral and like related to like support systems for individuals and for the ladder that you can climb up. All that's been eliminated, and it's just about like taking those points of crisis and monetizing them, and also like essentially like having the freedom to do whatever you want to make money. And that postmodernism's idea of like the liberation of like the self, that there's no longer an essential, there's no longer a thing. The signified can mean anything. They can, like, the idea that like these texts can be interpreted any number of ways and they're all valid is also like allowing for neoliberalism to take place inside of humans, inside of people, because you are like in line with wanting things to be free and wanting that liberation. It's just that this liberation is less kind. That shot hit me right there. So you guys make sense of that as you will. Sorry.
I like it.
Also, we got like 10 minutes before I have to go do a meet and greet with a bunch of translators. So
I think that's maybe part of the allure with this book, and what makes it so endearing for people is, one, it feels very postmodern, but at the same time, people love making connections. And there's, and in a fragmented work, you can make infinite connections and really go down a rabbit hole with it. And I think that's why books like this and other postmodern authors, you can just, there's a subset of people that can just totally nerd out, and like it'll have its own. You can write essay upon essay upon essay about, I'm going to write an essay on McDonald's and what it means in this book, and you could do that.
You could.
Yeah, and postmodernism is a weird term in so many ways, because like the general impulse was that things didn't have to be dictated so much. But at the same time, like the modernist literary impulse is to like break with the Victorians, that there's no objective truth. There's like individual, like it's very mind-based, it's Joycean, it's like the construction.
You mentioned rhizomic, and I always think of like a mushroom patch versus a tree with a root system.
There's no arboreal thing in postmodernism.
Yeah, there's no arboreal. It's
no like
spores popping up. And,
everything's possible. I remember being at a conference once where someone was like enamored with that idea to the point. Yeah, hello. I'm reading also the comments. Someone. Emily Hall just commented, like the Trombley painting has all the elements of sense, but keeps sense away.
Yes. And it displaces it. Like the sense and the meaning is like you have I don't know if this is what if Emily would say this, but the idea that like the elements are there and there is a feeling of sense, like a yearning for sense, and also like the idea that we could grasp it, if only, but.
I mean, this is like this is how every Pynchon book works and how Lost worked as a TV show. Was you always wanted like to sit on that level of like where you can you feel like there's a revelation about to happen, where everything will become clear and will make sense in the way that like traditionally things made quote unquote sense and logical and fit, and yet it never does. Like it upends that, it like disrupts that.
Like stupid polar bears for no reason. Yeah.
Polar bears.
Yeah, what's with the polar bears?
Hey, I know what the polar bears. I know of the polar bears. Got secrets, y'all. I could tell y'all secrets.
Lost secrets. Yeah.
All right. Well, so what should we look for next week as we continue reading? What do you think?
I'm really interested to see what happens with Harry Magana. I think he's a fascinating character. Okay. So the sheriff coming down from Huntsville. I think he's an interesting character because he is of Hispanic heritage. He speaks Spanish, but like with a gringo accent. He pronounces his own last name, sort of like quote unquote incorrectly from a Spanish speaking point of view. And he's there like nosing around, trying to figure out what happened to Lucy Ann Sanders or something.
Trying to find Miguel.
Do you believe in God, Harry? Yes, Signor Demetrio, said Harry Magana. Well, trust in God. He won't let anything disappear.
Yeah.
They're also like he's searching for Miguel, whatever his name is, who is one of the people that like hit on the girl
Lucy Ann,
and is searching for him and finds at his house a series of letters, which is also, just to bring this back, straight out of Twin Peaks. Like the cabin in the woods, that is very much that first Twin Peaks episode with the girls going out to the wood, or first season going out to the woods in the cabin, blah, blah, blah. There is, weirdly enough, there is a reference in this critical book to how much David Lynch influenced Bolaño.
Yeah.
The cinematography and the dis-ease of like his imagery and of those things where it's like there's a picture of like a plane in a field. And you're like, well, that's just a plane in the field. But the way it's described in here, it's like, that's sinister. There's something wrong there. There's a cabin in the woods, but it's not just any cabin. Like it's something bad is going to happen there.
When we were talking about setting last episode, and one thing that I always was feeling in reading it was it felt very like Blue Velvet, where you have this nice little town, but there's this buzzing that's happening in the grass at the beginning of Blue Velvet and the death. And I kind of got that. I totally got that vibe when they were doing setting, and that makes sense then that those Lynchian vibes were there on purpose, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there is the Lynchian like the uneasiness that he puts into his
the hum, the buzz, the
buzz,
electricity, yeah,
the unwavering shots that just take forever, and you're like something's under the surface here, but I don't know what it is. Like that's very present in here. And I think the crimes is like the place that comes most. Like, I mean, to be fair, I don't know why this came up yesterday, but I think I saw on Instagram like a reference to Mulholland Drive, and like the fact that like Mulholland Drive, like the craziest, scariest part of that movie is when they go to the theater and they just repeat Silencio, and it's like fucking creepy as shit. Like that is I think about that and I get nervous. Like I feel uncomfortable. Like this book has that uncomfortable feeling throughout the crimes part. Like every female is going to be dead, essentially is what you feel. And even the point where like the woman that he's seeing, is it Elvira? I forget what her name is.
Elvira.
Yeah, the director. I'm worried about her.
I'm not that worried about her. She's getting hers.
No, I mean I'm worried that
she's getting her 3-hour sessions with young Juan de Dios Martinez.
True. Back. She's fine. but she might not be fine
They
by
say their sterile goodbyes. She's serviced and he goes. I think all that's very disturbing, but I think there's something that's even worse. And it's potentially even worse than the hellish McDonald's. And that is the ventriloquist dummy, Andresito.
Fuck that thing.
So, like, talk about Lynch, talk about horror. We've got on today's morning variety show, we've got the autodidact ventriloquist and his dummy Andresito, and it's scary. But I think I would like to talk about this next week if we can. A little bit about ventriloquism and about ventriloquism in literature and about the author as ventriloquist, because I think that this is an act of ventriloquism in a lot of ways. And the fact that this person is introduced, this figure is introduced at this critical point where Florita, again, now we're having somebody else that's sort of like uncanny and has access potentially, right? We don't know if she's a fraud, if she's not a fraud, but it's set up at the moment and that she has sort of access to a kind of knowledge that is prophetic in nature, right? And then you have on that same show, we have this ventriloquist, which is the act of what? Of mimicry, of making something speak and of making it live. And this guy he's saying like, this dummy is alive. The little bastard's
trying to kill me.
And he's going to kill me. And so I think that that's something that maybe we could talk about next week.
I would also like to talk next week about her advice for eating and her all of the advice that she gives her, like correcting yourself is like based in food and diet. And I like that.
Yeah, I think a rice and fruit diet is going to be really good for your blood sugar levels. Way to go.
I agree. I've been rice and fruit I read that and I was like, rice and fruit all week. I'm there.
So between the rice and fruit advice from Florita Almada and Barry Seaman's advice for how to cook a good pork chop.
Yes.
We're all set.
You can find connections.
We're fine.
Anyone have a final favorite line? I've got one, and then I am gonna have to go because I have to do this thing. One that I pulled out is on 433. It's the list of Florita Almada's conclusions that can be drawn. 4, that if it was true that all effort led to a vast abyss, she had 2 recommendations to begin with. First, not to cheat people, and second, to treat them properly. I think that's good advice.
I like Florita.
Me too.
Mine's on 388. It's another dream sequence in this section. On the horizon, the mountains seemed to be burning or crumbling, and he kept driving toward them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the scene with that when whose dream is that?
Lalo's?
Is that Lalo's dream?
That one, no.
No?
Is that Epiphanos?
Epifano.
Oh.
Yeah. That is like that whole sequence with when they hit the coyote, the pregnant coyote. Again, that reminded me of that image of the penitentiary, that image of the prison. And again, like the female body busted open, destroyed, things living within. I thought that was so incredibly powerful, that section. I wanted to read something about the ventriloquist. Where is it? Okay, so this is where Florita is starting to like enter into her trance. I'm on page 436, and this ends up getting tied and connected to the ventriloquist and his dummy. She was afraid to speak because sometimes the first thing to be seized was her tongue. And even though she wanted to, because it would have been a great relief, she was afraid to close her eyes, since it was precisely when they were closed that she saw what the spirit possessing her saw. So Florita kept her eyes open and her mouth shut, though curved in a pleasant and enigmatic smile, watching the ventriloquist, who looked back and forth between her and his dummy as if he had no idea what was going on, but he could smell danger, the moment of revelation, unsolicited and afterward uncomprehended, the kind of revelation that flashes past and leaves us with only the certainty of a void that very quickly escapes even the word that contains it. And the ventriloquist knew this was dangerous.
I had that same thing, Mark. That's great.
It's really good.
There's right under there too is her bit where she's like, it's on the tip of my tongue. I don't censor myself, ladies, especially not at times like these. It's Santa Teresa. It's Santa Teresa. I see it clearly now. Women are being killed there. They're killing my daughters, my daughters, my daughters. One thing that I want to leave with, and then I need to go, is that Ciudad Juarez shows up in here. So my question for you is Ciudad Juarez a place where women are, there's also femicide going on within the world of 2666? If Santa Teresa is the stand-in for Ciudad Juarez, and Ciudad Juarez exists within the novel, are there also an insane amount of horrible murders going on there?
Maybe, but they're not the abyss, because we know there's just one abyss, and that's Santa Teresa. There can't be two. There can't be two